Hi, and welcome to My Classic Soul, the podcast dedicated to the best soul and R&B music throughout the decades. Today, soulmusic.com founder David Nathan and distinguished entertainment journalist Janine Coveney, former R&B music editor at Billboard magazine, talk about the legendary duo Nick Ashford and Valerie Simpson, whose 6 years with Warner Brothers Records produced several timeless classics included on the Hits, Rarities, and Remixes collection, such as Don't Cost You Nothing, Send It, and Stay Free. So let's join David and Janine for their insightful reflections about Nick and Val's impact as cultural trendsetters through their superb recordings and distinctive live performances throughout the 70s and beyond.
Hi, Janine. How are you?
Hi, David. How are you today? I'm so excited about our show today.
Yes. This is one of those podcasts that, really means a lot to me. And I know it means a lot to you because we both chose to do it. Without further ado, as they say, our subject today is based on a particular album, a compilation that was put together a few years ago by Ashford and Simpson called Hits, Rarities, and Remixes. I think that's the correct sequence of the title. And I know that when you and I were talking about different artists and different albums that we would want to talk about, this, of course, is not the entirety of Nick and Val's career at Warner Brothers, but it is at least gives a flavor of some of it. And it's a good excuse, if we needed one, to talk about the legacy of music that Ashford and Simpson recorded at Warner Brothers.
Absolutely. And as you said, this album gives a taste of what they're so well known for. Their musicality, their performance, their songwriting, and their production skills as well. So get a big taste of that. And I know, David, they're favorites of both of ours for these reasons. And I know that you in particular have some very personal memories of Nick Ashford and Valerie Simpson that I know you want to share with us. So tell us about that.
I do. I know. I mean, it's pretty obvious that we did a little prep work on this conversation, and that's fine because I do really want to say something about that. So just to set the scene for you, Janine, and for those who are listening, when I was in London in the early 70s, and beginning my blues and soul journey, so to speak. I remember one of the exciting things for me was doing a phone interview with Valerie Simpson when she had 2 albums out on Motown. Actually, it was, I think, I'm not sure if it was around the first one. It might have been her first solo album, which I absolutely loved. I mean, it was called Exposed, and I loved it song for song. I was like, wow. And I was familiar with Valerie as part of the Nick and Val team of songwriters and producers. Anyway, so she had one more solo album at Motown called Keep It Coming, I think it was called. And then on to Warner Brothers. And this, I remember, Janine, vividly when I first got a copy of Give Me Something Real, their first album for Warner Brothers, because it came in Britain as an import, because it wasn't released by Warner Brothers initially in Britain. And I worked at the shop, was part of Blues and Soul, that imported. So when I got this album, I just played it so much. I loved it. And we are going to talk about some of the songs on there. So now, fast forward to October 1974. I'm going to New York on my first holiday, first time in America. And, really was supposed to be just a holiday, but how am I going to be in New York? And here I am, this fledgling blues and soul writer, getting more assignments. How am I going to not want to talk to some of my favorite artists? And in particular, I said if there was a way I could do an interview with Ashford and Simpson while I was there, I was going to do it. And I remember the photographer who worked with Blues and Soul set it up with their now recently deceased assistant, T. Olson. And here I was, this kind of rookie British, soul music journalist, heading off to their brownstone on, I think, West 72nd Street. I had never been to an artist's home in my life, and let alone, these are my hero, Nick and Val, give me something real. I'm like, oh, and I was so nervous, Janine. I was so nervous. And I remember, I could even see the living room. There was a piano in it. And, at the time, Valerie was pregnant. And she wasn't very talkative. I mean, Nick did a lot of talking, and we talked about how they came to be at Warner Brothers and the album and so on. Anyway, so fast forward to when I came to live in New York in February of 1975, and I think I interviewed Nick and Val for pretty much every Warner Brothers album they had up until Stay Free. And I saw their performances. I thought I had personal favorite songs. And it was just great to have seen, that transition from when I first met them. They were growing as recording artists and performers, and I was growing as a music journalist. So it was like not quite the same journey, but you know what I'm saying? Like, they were an integral part of my introduction to America. And I, still have very cherished memories of that first interview and just all the conversations that we had subsequently. So it's really special for me to talk about Ashford and Simpson.
That is amazing. And in those interviews, did you get a sense of what drove them in their music? What was the inspiration? I mean, you hear the output that they had, and they were about love in their music. Did they talk about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, that was pretty evident through the music they were doing even before they became, quote, recording artists. I mean, you have to, listen to songs like, the Motown songs like "Ain't Nothing Like The Real Thing," and "You're All I Need to Get By." I mean, just "Your Precious Love."
Ain't No Mountain High Enough.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, just to kind of go backwards again for a moment, the album they did with Diana Ross, the second album she did, a second album was released, which was "Surrender." It was the main hit on the album was "Remember Me." Remember me as a big balloon, etc.
Yes.
Anyway, so I was already familiar with them as brilliant, composers, producers, and yes, so love, really was at the heart of all of those songs. I mean, beautiful love songs, and then I think Warner Brothers, I think it became a little bit more expansive in how they approached love from a different place. It wasn't all. It wasn't quite as, how should we say, like those early Motown songs were a bit more,
idealistic and romantic.
Yes, exactly, Janine. And so I think that, we talked about it, and we talked about one of the things that really surprised me was that Nick was almost always the primary lyricist, which I didn't know. I mean, I found that out obviously when I did that first interview with them in 1974, but became more aware in the conversations. And of course Valerie contributed, but I think Valerie was more, she said more the composer in terms of melody, and
right.
Nick. I don't know the sequence. Some songs I think were born from lyrics, some were born from melodies. But and the fact that they had a relationship, like a real personal. I mean, they were married. Yeah, the fact that I think that also informed how their songwriting developed.
Absolutely, because you see those Motown songs, those romantic, idealistic songs, early in their career. But even as you listen to their first Warner Brothers album together, they are writing about everything from the meeting to heartrending breakups,
Yes.
from
Yes.
obsession to longing for someone once they're gone. Yes. Give
Yes.
me
Yes.
something
Yes.
real.
Yes.
And, you
Yes.
know, and also what it means to have love and be in love, and how the road isn't always smooth.
Well,
So
no.
they really knew how to capture all of the stages as they were going through those stages in their
Mhm.
relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I know you and I, as we talked a little bit before we started the podcast. You know, I did not know that "Give Me Something Real" was like a classic album for you. So let's find out from you. How did I know how I heard it? I know how I met them and so on. But how about your introduction to "Give Me Something Real," which was not
Uh,
a massive album, was not a big best-selling
no,
album, you know? Yeah.
no. Again, I grew up in the Bronx with parents who were very interested in music. So they would often ask, like my father would ask his niece, who was in college, what new music was available to her. What should they be listening to? And I
Mm.
think that album, that Ashford and Simpson album, was one of their recommendations. I know I did not purchase it. I know it showed up in the
Mm-hmm.
family album collection. And
Yes.
from the moment that I heard it, and we often played music in the house, albums and albums on a
Yeah.
Saturday
Yeah.
while we were cleaning, or Saturday night or whatever. And I totally fell in love with everything about them, how they looked,
Yeah.
um, how they sang and interacted with one another. Here you have a male and female duo, and there had been male and female duos before, but how many African American duos where the male voice was almost higher in
Yeah.
falsetto than the female voice?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
totally worked. They totally blended, and their songs, the lyrics had so much power and meaning. I mean, I listened to it and felt like I was learning how to love, what it meant to
Wow.
love, what to
Wow.
value
Wow.
in myself and in others. It was very, very powerful listening to them as a young person, an adolescent, a young teenager. I was
Mm.
just, I was in love with them.
Mm. Well, it's interesting because I can't quite relate to it quite the same way because, you know, as we know, have our slight generation gap, not a big one, but still enough of a generation gap that I was already
Like a decade or so.
I was already experiencing the what you call it, peaks and valleys of love, and certainly that title track, you know, "Give Me Something Real," was very much what at that point in my life I was wanting. I didn't want, you know, this is what the song itself says, you know. I hadn't been through what it sounds like they had been through, and that song it kind of expresses, time to put away, you know, childish things. I think it's something like that is one of the lines in there.
Mhm.
And you know, I'm quite in that place, but I was certainly knowing the difference between real and fake
A love
in
that
the
won't
world of love,
fade,
in the world of love, in the world of
that
love.
won't fade in the light of day.
I think the only track that's on the particular album that we're referring to that's on there is "Have You Ever Tried It," is on this Hits, Remixes, and Rarities. But let's move on to some of the other pieces of music on there, but also the kind of progression of their career. Um, you know, I think it's true to say, and I know that in interviews that I did with them after after that first interview, you know, there was a certain kind of disappointment with the fact that those first few albums on Warner Brothers just did not really take off. They didn't take off to the degree that they had hoped. And you know, they were putting some good music out, and there was no question about it, but it just simply didn't quite resonate. And to be fair, you know, at that time also, I think that Warner Brothers was in the process of really getting itself much more grounded in the world of R&B and certainly dance music, which came a little later. But they weren't, it took a while before Nick and Val became like, even I would say in the world of R&B radio, and so they weren't at that point staples, so to speak. They weren't like automatically every record they've got, people would add them on radio, and they were building their performance career. I think you mentioned to me about them appearing on television. Did you actually see the Ellis Hazlitt show with Soul with them on it?
I did not, but okay. I'm in the process of watching those Soul shows. Yes.
Yes. Well, of course, I didn't see them because because they predated my coming to America.
Yes.
So I'm looking through the next album off that was I Want to Be Selfish, which has they've used one track on this collection we talk about called Everybody's Got to Give It Up. But I have to be honest with you, I don't really remember it. It's a rarity, as they say. But by the time we get to album 3, we are talking about a couple of songs that started to really make impact on the dance music scene.
Absolutely.
And I want to talk to you about one in particular because I want to check in with you if it's one of your favorites, which is Over and Over.
Over and over. Okay, let me stop now.
Hello. We get previews of so if we start singing one of these songs together, then maybe
right. The show will. Yes.
But yeah, Over and Over. So, is that an important song to you, or do you recall it from?
I wouldn't say that it's an important song for me. I do remember it, but it wasn't one of my favorites in the pantheon of Nick and Val songs from that period. Although yes. I do have a memory of it, and of course, it re-resonated with me because I heard a version by Sylvester.
Oh yeah.
That was fantastic. I don't think he used all of the song in his remake. I don't remember him singing specific verses. It was more like the chorus, but I could be misremembering. But I'm remember
some of the verses are in there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, some of the verses are in there.
So the Sylvester version reacquainted me with it. I thought, I've heard this before. Oh yeah, okay.
And it was a massive hit from Sylvester. Massive.
Yeah. So and like many of those Hop, Sack, and Silk songs from their publishing company.
Let's pause for a quick break, then we'll return to David Nathan and Janine Coveney as they continue to discuss the 70s pioneering recordings of Nick Ashford and Valerie Simpson. Check out In the Meantime by renowned trumpeter Willie Bradley featuring Gerald Alston, the lead singer of the legendary group The Manhattans. This jazzy groove with lyrics right on time with what's happening in the world today is on Soul Music Records, available now on all digital platforms.
I think now we go on to something where I think by this time we were at Send It, which has some fantastic. I mean, there's a few things that we could talk about on Send It. But before we get to that, do you remember when you first started seeing them perform live?
It would have been
on your career.
I think it would have been on television and then later in their career. But one of the things that I enjoyed about them, of course, their stagecraft, and they're so striking looking. Yeah. You know, I mean, nobody looked like Nicholas Ashford. I mean, unless maybe Verdine White. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, that came later. I think Verdine was a little later in his hairstylings. But yeah, exactly. I gotcha.
He was an original, and he was tall, and she was small, and they just had this incredible chemistry together. And they always looked, they looked fantastic. They were always very precise about their stage clothes and their moves. And from what I remember, they had very tight shows. And, you could still relate to every word that they sang. It was so much about the message.
Oh, yeah. No question.
And I mean, Valerie is amazing. Well, so is Nick, really. They each had their own style.
They blended. Yeah, they blended. Yeah, that's very true. Well, there's a few songs on here that I really like to reference, and of course, the biggest hit on this album was "Don't Cost You Nothing." Oh, Janine's gonna break out again, though. I think we're gonna have to turn My Classic Soul into the Janine live, Janine live moments.
Well, I have a much stronger memory of that song because I think that it came out during my college years, and one's teen years and college years when you love to go to parties and dances and clubs, and you're listening to this music at fantastic volume. And I think that club period, because of the way the music was amplified when we were in these dance clubs, and you could hear all the intricacies of the instrumentation and how powerful the bottom was and the power of their voices, it left an indelible impression on me. And also, once again, their message. I mean, to me, a lot of their songs are not just about love. Oh, love, the world needs love, everybody needs love. They were totally insistent on the idea that we should all take a chance. It's taking a chance.
Yeah.
And you have to be brave enough to take the leap. And that's what Don't Cost You Nothing is about. It's an argument, really. Every verse is an argument for why not. Come on, let's go. Let's do it. Let's fall in love.
Did you ever find yourself in a place where you felt like that, saying that to someone, or that someone would say that to you, like, "Hey, Janine, you take a chance, don't cost you nothing." Did that ever happen to you during your college years? I might as well ask.
Maybe not in so many words, but certainly when you have young men trying to catch the attention of young women, it's usually young men saying to the young women, "Take a chance on me, you won't be disappointed." Or maybe they don't say, "Maybe you will be disappointed, but take a chance." Anyway, take a chance just for tonight, at least.
Yes. Okay. And then, the couple of the songs on here, which are really major for me in terms of the history of the songs and also, the impact. So, of course, there's Send It, which is the title track. But for me, the two most intriguing songs on here is there's which is interesting. They use it on this Rarities CD package compilation that we were referencing. Is a song called Top of the Stairs. Now, Top of the Stairs is kind of obscure, even for a lot of, I would say, American Ashford Simpson fans. And it was actually recorded by another duo called Collins and Collins. Anyway, in Britain, for whatever reason, Top of the Stairs by Ashford and Simpson became this rare groove classic years later, not at the time, but years later, and kind of a great story, Janine, is at some point, I'd say probably in the early, I want to say it was probably maybe 2012 or something like that. A colleague of mine brought Nick and Val to headline at an event that happens every year, or has happened every year, called the Luxury Soul Weekender. And it's usually held in a big hotel. And, it was quite a lot to bring Nick and Val because they insisted, of course, that they brought their own musicians and background singers. So it was a big, it was a big deal. But the one thing that the person who brought them to put them together for the shows insisted, you must sing Top of the Stairs. And Nick and Val had to learn it. They had never performed the song other than when they recorded it. And when they did the show that night, they said, we want you all to know that we actually had to go back and learn the song just for you all, because this is not part of our repertoire usually, and had never performed it. It's a great song. It's very catchy, and it's again, like you said, every song seems to have a real different kind of message. I'll take you up to the top of the stairs. But the other thing is a song called Budgie Budgie. Now, Budgie Budgie on this album and also on the remixes collection is instrumental.
Yes. And
it's really Valerie playing piano, and of course the whole production around it. And it's a great song instrumentally. And
one of my favorites.
Yes, and when they had Gladys Knight and the Pips do it on one of the first albums that they did for Columbia, which Nick and Val produced, just like, wow. I mean, every word in that song, I mean, at the time period, of everybody trying to be
right.
bougie, bougie. And you like, we can't talk about the lyrics because there's no lyrics on this version, but you know the song.
Absolutely. And, bougie was a popular saying back in that time to describe, this new class of affluence among African Americans, and, being stylish and in the know. And I just think it's funny that the song is called Budgie Budgie because instrumentally, it's extremely sophisticated and sleek and almost cinematic. And it shows me what great producers they were as well to, the arrangements on all of their songs are really beautiful, just intricate and use the orchestra well and incorporate Val's church influence piano playing really well. So there's a lot to appreciate them for. And I don't think they get enough credit in the pantheon of rhythm and blues.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Janine, because to me, that is one of the most under recognized aspects of their work. I mean, if you just listen to the production, if you just took that one track, Budgie Budgie, and just listen to the intricacy of all the arrangement. Now, the arrangements, they worked very closely with a legendary man, who really they met in Motown, Paul Reiser. Paul Reiser from Detroit had been doing other arrangements on other music for Motown before he started working with Nick and Val. And if you listen to those first couple of Diana Ross albums at Motown, those are Paul Reiser arrangements. And, they continued working with him, obviously, at Warner Brothers. And so, and I think there's a quote I have that where Valerie says that, she loved working with him because she would lay down the demos of the songs. And he would basically create the orchestrations and arrangements around the demos. So by the time they go in the studio, I mean, just full-on productions, background vocals. I mean, it was just, I think that what you said is very much true. It's one of the things I love about their work is it's full, it's proper, it's like full-on, it's like, intricate, it's
multi-layered.
Yeah.
There's strings, there's flutes, there's harp.
Everything.
Even in that one song we mentioned that, which one was it that the people don't really know that well?
Up the stairs, or I mean,
no, I think it was One More Try.
Yes, One More Try.
It's a very unusual for them in that they're singing together, but it has a Brazilian rhythm almost, and even that is amazing.
Yeah, I think you're correct. I don't know that people really necessarily give credit to the creativity and the artistry of Nick and Val on those albums. I mean, yes, they're the hits, which of course we're going to get into more in a moment about some of the later hits at Warner Brothers. But really, I think the that's what I loved about them. I really loved them, and because I grew up listening to the kind of intricacies of music in like Bacharach and David, and later
Right.
Tom Bell, and and just others. I mean, just really that whole melding of different aspects of music that makes it almost classical in some ways, almost a classical sense here with orchestrations. But anyway, yes, Budgie, and Don't Cost You Nothing, and Top of the Stairs. And then I think by then, I'm looking at what happens next. Now, the main song on this album that is also on this collection is It Seems to Hang On. But the album, of course, is It Still Good to You, which was actually, at that point, their best-selling album. It's interesting that there's only one track from there that's on this remix collection. By this point, which would be 1978, I think, were you fully conversant with what the kind of work they were doing, or more conversant, shall we say?
I would say more conversant with the work that they were doing, and I remember that there was definitely high regard for them among most of my friends who were into music. So people seemed to wait for and fully embrace what the new album release was, what the new single release was, because there was that understanding. Even at that time during the 70s, there was an appreciation for the mix of rock and R&B, jazz and R&B. There was a lot of fusion. There were a lot of new sort of jazz artists who were singing R&B, and R&B artists who were flirting with jazz, and that seemed to be very popular. And Nick and Val seemed to skirt that wave. Yes, they were R&B, but they were also almost like Tin Pan Alley, but they were jazzy because of their instrumentation, and they had amazing shows, so people who were into stagecraft were into that. And again, unapologetically Black, and not trying to be anything but themselves in their imagery. So they were very popular, and I was part of that, waiting for the next song to come and the next dance floor hit, because I was always about dancing.
Yes. Well, one thing I just want to also take a note from what you just said, which is about their live shows. I mean, they took the same kind of professional approach that they took to recording and brought it to the stage. And I know that they worked a lot with George Faison.
Oh yes,
good friend of theirs, choreographer. I mean, these shows were not just like thrown together. They were intricate, put together the moves. I mean, that's what made them so compelling. As we want to see an Ashford and Simpson show, because it isn't just like two people standing. I mean, there are duos who unfortunately were not quite so, how should we say, not quite so, what's the right word for this?
Compelling to watch.
Correct. Compelling to watch. So then we come on to what is absolutely my favorite Nick and Val album, is still this one, Stay Free. So let's hear from you, because I got a few things to say about this album. Stay Free has on it, Found a Cure, and of course, Stay Free title track, and Nobody Knows.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows the inside. So let's hear from you about if this album resonated for you also. And I think, it was obviously a massive success, particularly on the dance floors.
Exactly. And when people want to dance, they want to be in close proximity and ownership of the music that makes them happy. And that helped push this album. And of course, I feel like they hit their stride in terms of connecting with that dance floor ethos, but at the same time, they weren't slaves to the disco sound per se, which was becoming very commercial and predictable. They did it their way and still managed to share their message, which is the all consuming power of love, and found a cure, if you're in love, newly in love. I mean, that idea of Dr. Love or Dr. Feel Good or, Dr. Mills is singing, I'm going to give you a little bit of that medicine. So we have a theme of love being the cure. And, it's an exciting production. It's a great record.
Well, I have to tell you, when I did the interview with Nick and Val for the Stay Free album, it actually, the thing I might have referenced at the beginning of this conversation, it took place in the same place we did our first interview. That was just 5 years before. And I remember my opening line when I sat down, because by then we knew each other, and I said, now I've got to ask you a question. When you put this album together, were you reading my mind? And they both looked at me and said, what? I said, they grinned. I said, because particularly Stay Free and Nobody Knows. I said, it's almost like you went into my mind and pulled these songs out. And I tell you, Janine, I could not stop playing either of them. And even to this day, Stay Free is very much, both of those songs, Stay Free and Nobody Knows, are really part of my, the tapestry of my life, I would say. I'm putting a lot of emphasis on them, but those lyrics for Stay Free.
I know. Wow. Just listening to the project again and listening to those two songs after not having heard them for a long time, I was stunned to hear Stay Free again. It's almost like I'm hearing the lyrics for the first time. Yeah. And Nobody Knows, because I'm an introvert. Yeah. And so I keep a lot of things inside, and I've always kind of gone my own way. And it's amazing to listen to those songs. Yes. And that's the magic of what they do, is to get into the psyche of how we think, how we see ourselves and how we see others, and the barriers that we put up. I mean, I've mentioned this before, and these songs really demonstrate it. They don't have much patience, I think, for people who want to walk the lonely path. They seem to feel, philosophically, that we're better in love. Like, love lifts us up to where we belong. Yeah.
Well, you see, the last thing to say, to complete our, I think, perfect way to complete our conversation is that the reason I like Stay Free so much is because I've pretty much lived that way. And even though I understood what they were saying, I understood what Nick was saying in the lyrics. In fact, just a little PS on that. I remember when I asked about what was the inspiration for the song, and Valerie said, well, sometimes what Nick does is he goes away for a couple of days to just think about, to come up with ideas. Just goes away and comes back with these song ideas. And I think that's how that one began. But it really is about I think also the tussle, so to speak. Even within a relationship, people want to be able to feel like they have a sense of freedom. And so, but for me, that's been an anthem. However, I have to say that, of course, if you really listen to the words, it's basically, ha, 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 ha. In other words,
they're
you're going to be lonely. See, we both got to sing today.
They're laughing at the idea of independent. Ha, 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 ha.
Well, I think
right.
before we get given our own My Classic Soul whole full show of doing our renditions Ashford and Simpson songs, we should say a fond adieu. And thank you again. This is always great to talk to you, Janine. And I think that this is one of my favorite subjects. So I'm glad that we got a chance to talk about the legacy of Nick Ashford and Valerie Simpson through their Warner Brothers years.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure and a joy. Thank you so much, David.
You're welcome. Take care now. Bye.
All right. Bye.
And thank you, David and Janine. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform, and visit us for breaking news and daily updates about your favorite soul and R&B artists at soulmusic.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on My Classic Soul.